Challenge. They didn't have a curriculum set in place yet, so it was our job.
Department. There I work with Mrs. Jones and Mr. Spring.
There is a philosophy behind that, so that they grow up to want to stand on their own 2 feet.
Valentine lunch. This lunch catered to our students, it catered friends, colleagues, and there I worked with Melissa.
Quite a nice calling, and with an insistent front runner like Mr. James Wood.
Show last year, well, the year before COVID, and then we...
English education. So in terms of the MAC, what started in a modest way blossomed.
My name is Clayton Holliday. I was appointed as the MAC accountant back in 1991, and ever since has been very much involved in the total operations of the MAC. However, my job and tasks and duties were not limited only to financial management, and it included a lot of operational aspects. Back in time, I shared office with the first executive director, Mrs. Josiane Fleming Hardson, after which in 1993 we established a main office block, whereas we were then transferred to the manse in Phillipsburg, the former dwelling of the ministers of the Methodist Church of Saint-Martin. However, we then moved on to many other projects, and the department in itself took on a lot more of the splintered responsibilities that were, at the point of my appointment, outsourced. Namely, the payroll was outsourced. That was brought in-house. And eventually, we also annexed the accounts receivable and controlled the payables as well from within the finance block. Whereas then we had some appointments made to my department, which made it a group of 3 instead of 1 as when I started, and has mushroomed into a group that is basically managing finances for 4 branches, namely the pre-childhood, which we refer to as early stimulation. Then you have the then you have the elementary, which is from grade 1 or K1 to grade 6, now named or referred to as Group 1, Cycle 1 and Cycle 2, whereas then you deal with Group 1, 2, and 3, which is Cycle 1, and then you had the Cycle 2, which starts at grade 4 in the old structure, or grade 3 in the old structure, and then goes up to grade 6, which is Group 8. And noteworthy to even state that we have even gone further now. We established the comprehensive secondary ed, which is first form to 5th form, which that department started back in 2013, which was one of the greater adages, knowing the plan and the vision that Mr. Gums had for the MAC. Besides the financial control thereof, I've also been privy to escorting the grade 6 group children, I think on 2 or 3 occasions, to islands where they did their educational tour, which was generally the backdrop of their social studies project. And there then you get a real hands-on experience as to the build-up and the development of the children and the way they go about preparing themselves for education. And in addition to that, I also was part and member of the MAC travel team, which was a group established to sort of like enable us to have a retreat among staff, from teachers, admin, and all branches within the group. So, and that group is very learning, because then you really get a bird's eye view and a good experience and a good look at the come off of the staff with whom you were working, as well as you learn to know your colleagues a little even better from a social perspective, unlike the professional perspective where it could have been rather rigid. Because knowing my role, as a financial person, you're not the most relished person depending on what nature you're dealing with, but however, it was still learning to get to know the individuals from a close perspective, that you get a good sit down on those tours where you get to debrief, exhale, and then talk to persons on a person-to-person basis. looking back, my experience has been vast. It's now, I'm leading up to 30 years come October 2nd this year. And I must say it was learned because I've learned various aspects of the business, from budgeting to managing to controlling to even overseeing financial projects, which is one of my passions. I relish and I love the construction field, and many of the developments that we have had in terms of construction of classrooms and campus sites. I've been very involved and in basically liaisoning with the contractors to make sure that the project goes according to plan and adjustments made timely in order not to have situations where you then have to do amendments after the projects. And that in itself is an extraordinary plus for me. And looking back, I must say, despite my initial reluctance to taking the appointment, I can gladly smile and say I have learned a lot, despite 3 refusals to taking up the position by the then insistent Mr. Late Vance James Jr., who told me from inception when he saw me applying at government, he said, I have a place for you, and I'd wish you don't say no. Today I can smile and say, well, thanks to him, I've taken on the challenge. The challenge has been great, and it has made me who I am today with a whole lot of experience. So when you look back at the experience I've gained, I can gladly say it was quite a nice calling, and with an insistent front runner like Mr. James, who really sat on my case to really take up this responsibility, and to have even seen the MAC move from a manual financial management to a computerized financial management, as well as a database for human resource data like the staff information in one system. That has all happened under my watch, and it is my privilege to really try and really deepen it out that it covers every detail as to the MAC operations and the staff chosen to really run within it. So looking back at my 30 years, I must say I'm thankful to God for the energy and confidence instilled in me every morning to say, okay, God, I'm facing another day. Do give me the strength to pursue what I have before me today. And in light of the motto and logo of the MAC, from cradle to grave, I believe I've seen the moves from the cradle. Right now, I'm not calling on any grave, but we are looking at the other steps that still needs to come in. Because if you look at the the organizational thread and the build-up, we are still missing but a few, the philanthropic aspect and the geontographic part, whereas gerontological one, whereas we can then serve above secondary level to tertiary level as well as the aged home. So we are still living with the desire to finally establish our own center of management, whereas we have a fixed building as the main office of the MAC. And hopefully I may experience it, but it is my goal and my hope that I will be able to contribute to such and make sure then that we have a home of our own of the controlling body, which is the main office, head office of the MAC, where then we won't have to be wondering if and when we have to give up our home stay, but it will be home for good. All in all, I give the MAC, the founder of the MAC, praise for having envisioned such an organization and to see that I have been part of the growth factors, looking at the growth of staff when I started in comparison to the growth of staff, the staff that we have now, which has basically tripled over some 30 years, because when I joined the MAC, it was just about 48 personnel. Today, we are looking at a fixed personnel listing of 133. So when you look at it, we look at the fact that we had a step up in financial responsibilities and duties to basically service every member of staff, keep the operations as accurate as possible, and also create reserves in order for any expansions which we have done in the last few years. And by the grace of God, we have been able to pre-finance, hoping that one of these days we might still get it back based on the agreements that's supposed to have been on table. But all in all, we must say the school has grown financially as well as operationally. And it was not an easy task. I have known many a times when I had to apply my trainings, my prior trainings as a trained officer from the tax office, towards the better end of the operations for it to flow monthly. So for that, again, I say I give God thanks for having charted my road into the MAC and being able to be of service to the MAC this length of time.
I am Rose Hughes Coram, the Executive Director of the Foundation Methodist Agogic Center. I started my career at the MAC in 1991 when the schools were being reshuffled, reorganized, and Campus 3 was created. I was hired to be the school manager of Campus 3, which at that time housed 4 classes, up to grade 2. And every year thereafter, another grade was added. My first year at the MAC, because I was new to the institution, I was asked to teach the grade 6. So during that time, Mrs. Hodge was the assistant school manager in Simpson Bay. And Mrs. Hodge had many years of experience with the MAC and in teaching. The teachers at Simpson Bay were a close-knit community. We discussed, we planned, and we did things together as a family. And we took care of the children in our charge. What I remember most about Simpson Bay were the many workshops that were held, and the teachers enjoyed sharing their ideas and their crafts with the other teachers. We had many exhibitions where we invited parents to come in and see what their children were doing. There was one year, one member of staff suggested that in order for us to raise some funds, that we hold a Valentine lunch. This lunch catered to our students, it catered to parents, it catered to the entire MAC and community. This Valentine lunch became our staple. It lasted for a few years, up until '95 when the hurricane came, and then we stopped. But during this lunch, teachers cooked, parents cooked, prepared, brought their dishes. We even had persons that were delivering food, and that really showed you the cohesiveness of the staff and the parents. Another highlight were our science fairs. We started the science fairs. The children got a chance to experiment and to explain and to display what they have learned. Campus 3, over the years, we've been in many locations in Cold Bay and Simpson Bay, even in the church in Cold Bay, Church Hall in Cold Bay. Then we were moved to Betty's Estate. At that time, we had 4 classes in Simpson Bay, 4 classes in Betty's Estate. My office then was located in Betty's Estate, so I had to travel between the locations to visit the teachers and to make sure everything was running smoothly. A couple years later, it was decided that Campus 3 was going to be merged with Campus 2. So we had to pack up and move, and then at that time, I became the innovation coordinator as well as the education coordinator for all the schools. And I worked very closely with the late Mr. Clinton Spring, and then eventually becoming his assistant, so assistant to the director. During that time, also, we met, we discussed, learned a lot in terms of the internal operations of the Foundation Methodist Agogic Center. During that time, after Mrs. Spring passed, I became the executive director. Mrs. Spring had started the process again for us to expand because we got very comfortable with our elementary schools. We now had 2 double elementary schools as well as our early stimulation, fully functional, doing excellent work with our students, producing great results. So it was time for us to move on. It was time for us to go a little higher in our plan. So I met with Dr. James, Dr. Velda James, who has a wealth of knowledge and experience at the secondary level. And the two of us worked and put our curriculum together and did everything that we needed to do in order to meet the criteria set by the government of St. Martin. So in 2014, we started the MAC, Comprehensive Secondary Education, that is fully functional, fully operational today, and doing extremely well. In my role now as Executive Director, I am the one that oversees all the various schools, the operations, the managers, teachers, etc. It has been a very rewarding experience. I have learned a lot, and we are continuing to learn a lot. As we celebrate our 45th anniversary, we have accomplished a lot, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. So I look forward to the continued growth and development of this institution. Happy birthday to the MAC. Happy 45th anniversary.
After that, Mr. Harrigan left the MAC to work at the government, and I started to work with the fundraising